Warning. Although this podcast revolves around Disney, Disney movies, and Disney-related themes, we have a tendency to use mature language which is not suitable for all ages. Discretion is advised. Ladies and gentlemen, it is the 21st and final episode of 2020 for the Ocho and Ortiz Disney podcast. On this episode, we are going to be talking about Noelle. So without further ado, let's get into things. Buddy Josh, how is it going?
Oh, it's going, buddy Dave. You know, it's December.
It is December.
It's fun. Happy late birthday.
Thank you. Happy early birthday. By the time this comes out, it'll almost be your birthday. I think this is going to be coming out on the 13th. We're scrambling. We're recording this like a week before its scheduled release date. We normally record well in advance, but we've both been super busy and haven't had a chance. But yes, it was my birthday yesterday. We're recording this on December 6th, and your birthday is on the 18th?
My birthday is non-existent.
Okay, Josh doesn't have a birthday, but he does have a birthday. And because we both have birthdays in December, if you go to teespring.com/stores/Ocho-and-Ortiz, from now until December the 20th, any purchase that you make, if you use the code BIRTHDAY at checkout, you save 20% off of your order. So go to teespring.com/stores/Ocho-and-Ortiz. Use promo code BIRTHDAY at checkout. Had to get a little plug in there while it popped into my head.
So, hey, I need to ask you something. Dave, have you seen Thor Ragnarok?
No.
Oh my God! There's a little thing on there where Jeff Goldblum is in that movie.
Nice.
And they push a button on his private spaceship, and he just pops up singing "It's my birthday," some bullshit like that.
I'm sure I can probably YouTube that clip.
That's what I was gonna do and send it to you right now because it was so funny. Oh my God, that's hilarious! It's my birthday. I type "it's my" and it's like "it's my birthday." Thor Ragnarok.
Nice.
It's like 26 seconds. I'm gonna share it to you right now on Instagram. There, Dave.
Nice.
Right? Can you get my Instagram messages still or no?
As far as I know, I can. Yeah.
Didn't you block my ass?
No. I was going to, but no. But yeah, so it's our birthday months in December. So we already gave the place where you can go to get merch. You can also go to Spreadshirt, shop.spreadshirt.com/Ocho-and-Ortiz Disney Pod if you want to grab some merch off of Spreadshirt. Unfortunately, we don't have as much control on sales on Spreadshirt as we do with Teespring. That's why I tend to use Teespring and promote that more. But you can go to Spreadshirt. You can also find us on social medias, Twitter at Ocho Ortiz Disney, Facebook, facebook.com/Ocho-and-Ortiz Disney Pod, Instagram at Ocho-and-Ortiz Disney Pod. And we're also on TikTok. Just look for Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod on TikTok. And of course, you can find us on so many great places for your podcasts and listening pleasure. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, and our main source of uploading is Podbean, Ocho and Ortiz DisneyPod.podbean.com. So if you can't support us by buying some merch, and if you're not able to support us on Patreon, which you can do by going to patreon.com/Ocho-and-Ortiz Disney Pod. But if you can't afford to buy any merch right now, and if you can't afford to become our patron on Patreon, the best way you can help grow this show for free is just to follow us on the social medias, share this show with your friends, leave us some comments, leave us some ratings, give us some feedback. We would greatly appreciate it. We are almost, as of this recording, at 1,300 episodes. And for a show that just started in April, where we weren't sure how long we were going to be doing it, that still just completely blows my mind right now.
Yeah, no, that was insane. When you sent me that, like, what the updated stats were the other day, I was fucking blown away.
Yeah, we have the Santa Claus review that we did as our last episode was our 20th episode. And right now we have 7 episodes at 40 or more downloads. And we have a couple in the 50s. Again, the first Descents episode we did, I don't know why that took off so late, but it did, and I'm thankful for people that have downloaded it. I think that's close to almost 500 downloads now, that episode alone. So yeah, we're getting better, we're getting more downloads, and we appreciate everybody that listens. But we would absolutely love your feedback and for you to share this podcast. And like I said, I did shout out our Patreon earlier. I would like to give a shout out to the executive producer of this show, William L. He is currently our only patron on Patreon. So big shout out to William. And he's been a great support. And hopefully if there's anyone else out there listening that can support us on Patreon, even if it's as little as $1, we would greatly appreciate that. This episode, as I said off the top, we're going to be reviewing Noelle. And I think we're going to do it a little differently because we're so tight on time, because the scheduled release for this is next Sunday, December the 13th. And because you and I are both busy, but more importantly me, because I'm the one that edits the podcast, and I'm not going to have a lot of time this week to edit the podcast due to work. I don't think we'll go too long on this podcast. We'll try to keep it relatively short. We won't go too in-depth into the reviews like we normally do. We're not going to go scene by scene. We'll just do a brief rundown. Hopefully we'll keep this around 40-45 minutes. So apologies. I have been enjoying the longer podcasts and going more in-depth with reviews. I just don't have a whole lot of time to edit it right now. And like I said, I know Josh is busy with work, and so am I. So apologies for that one, but hopefully you guys will still enjoy this episode.
Oh yeah, no, it'll be fun. I'm okay with this short one because the work is just hectic right now. You know, we're in the busiest seasons for both of us, so yeah.
Having said that, I have been going on social media and asking people to give their feedbacks either for this movie that we're reviewing tonight, Noelle, or for any movies that we've reviewed in the past. I've posted a video to TikTok and Instagram, I think Facebook as well, asking people to leave us feedback. And before we get into our review, I want to read feedback that we got on TikTok. Denver Juggler wrote, "I am following you more recently, so probably missed this episode." You didn't, Denver Juggler. Don't worry, you didn't. We're recording it right now. You're still in time. But I loved Noelle. Love Anna Kendrick, and the rest of the cast was absolutely awesome. And love the language skill. Not really sure what love the language skill means, so I do apologize for not quite understanding that last part. But Denver Juggler, we appreciate the review, and he absolutely loved this movie. I think you and I are going to have different views on this movie. So without further ado, let's get into things. So like I said, we're not going to go scene by scene, but basically Noelle is a movie which centers around the 2 children of Santa Claus, Nick and of course the main title character, Noelle. Nick being played by Bill Hader and Noelle being played by Anna Kendrick. And obviously with Santa Claus being their father, he eventually tells Nick that Nick is one day going to take over as Santa Claus. And one of the very first scenes in the movie, I think it's actually the opening scene, Santa Claus gifts his son Nick the Santa Claus hat and tells him that it's time to begin his training. And he basically puts Noelle in charge of training Nick. So they grow up together, obviously, and eventually their father, Santa Claus, dies, and it's up to Nick to take over as Santa Claus. So it's up to Nick to take over in the Kringle footsteps and become the next Santa Claus. I think during the point where Nick takes over, Noelle mentions that he becomes the 24th, maybe 23rd Kringle to don the Santa Claus suit. Either 23rd, 24th, somewhere around there. And let's say 24.
Yeah, I think 24. I think 24 is right.
And so, anyways, Nick's now forced to become Santa Claus, and he really doesn't want to do it. He's not really good at it, and Noelle's trying to train him, trying to get him to go down chimneys, learn how to ride the sleigh and everything. He's not having it. So Nick and Noelle finally have like a sit-down chat, like a little brother-sister heart-to-heart, and Nick basically says to Noelle he can't do this job. And Noelle says, you know what? Why don't you take some time, take the weekend, get away, clear your head, come back, and then when you come back, I'm sure you'll be fine. But you can do this. Just take a weekend off to clear your mind. So Nick takes off, but he doesn't come back. He just completely disappears. And it's getting closer and closer to Christmas. So everybody in the North Pole is starting to worry about Nick and what they're going to do if they can't find Santa Claus. And so they go to the Elder Council of Elves, and it's like a big town hall meeting thing. And it's decided that if Nick has not returned, that it's going to be Nick and Noelle's cousin Gabe that becomes Santa Claus. And Gabe is like this big tech junkie. He really doesn't want to be Santa Claus either. He's more into tech rather than anything else.
Gabe is also played by Billy Eichner, who that guy's just fucking so funny. I don't know if you've ever seen him before.
I've heard the name, but I'm not overly familiar with his other work.
Yeah, he had a show. I think it was supposed to be like a web show, but I remember it being on TV a couple of times coming, and it was called Billy on the Street, right? And it was just him going up and asking people random questions, and if they got it, he would say yes or no or whatever. And he would, if it wasn't the answer he was looking for, he would get mad and walk away, just going, "Oh my god!" and just leave. So he was actually pretty funny.
So yeah, he's playing Gabe in this one, and Gabe is very, what's the word I'm looking for? Lethargic. He really doesn't seem too interested in doing anything other than his tech stuff.
Yeah, because he fully says that when they're like, "Oh, you're gonna have to be the next Santa Claus," and he's like, "No, I'm in the tech department."
Yeah, I'm in IT.
Yeah, and I think that's where he says, "And I'm loving it," right?
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah. So he doesn't want to be Santa Claus either. And nobody else really wants him to be Santa Claus. And they're all pissed off at Noelle for sending Nick away and telling him to get out of the North Pole.
How dare you be mad at Anna Kendrick?
Right? God, she is absolutely adorable. But so Noelle takes it upon herself that she's going to, well, first she gets all moody and doesn't want to like do anything or go outside or anything because everyone hates her. And then I guess it's basically her elf nanny, Polly, basically forces her to get up and go look for her brother. So Noelle is like looking through a stack of magazines and she sees like a travel page torn out. And she pieces together that Nick has probably gone to Phoenix, Arizona. So that's where Noelle goes. She takes the reindeer and she flies off to Phoenix, Arizona. With
Polly, and Polly did not want to go, though, right?
Right. Yeah, Polly was reluctant, but it was her job to look after Noelle. So yeah. She went anyways. Polly being played by Shirley MacLaine.
Yes.
And so they get to Phoenix, Arizona, and Noelle is on a mission to find her brother. But first, they land in sort of an outdoor mall area, and they get arrested and get taken into the woman that's in control of the mall, into her office. And she thinks that Noelle and Polly are people from like a competitor's mall trying to sabotage Christmas for that particular mall. But eventually she like releases them, and because one of the managers from one of the stores in the mall talks about how much business that the reindeers outside are drumming up for him. It's the manager of a I guess like an animal store, like a pet store. And
Yes.
And people are coming in and buying pet food to feed the reindeers, and it's making his store a ton of money. So he comes in and praises like the mall manager woman and talks about what a great idea this was. And that's when she decides to let Polly and Noelle go. So Polly is basically staying with the reindeers, and Noelle goes to look for her brother, and she sees an advertisement for a private detective named Jake. So she goes to his office and they meet, and she basically enlists him for his help to find her brother, and he tells her what his fee is. And so obviously she doesn't have money, but she has gold coins made out of chocolate from the North Pole.
Yeah, that was amazing. I'm not gonna lie.
So she pays him with the chocolates, which obviously he just like gives back to her, and he's kind of like second guessing his decision to help her. And so they're walking out of his office, and he needs to make a phone call, but his phone is dead. So Noelle's trying to help him find somebody that would lend him their phone so he can make the call. And they talk to a couple people, and of course, people don't want to give up their cell phones. And then Noelle spots a guy in the parking lot across the way, and she's like, "Ask him, he's nice." So Jake asks the guy to borrow his phone. The guy agrees, and after Jake finishes his phone call and gives the call back, he sort of like questions again whether he wants to take on Noelle or not. But he tells him to come back and see her the next day. So, anyways, this lead, again, I'm trying to cut this short. I don't want to go scene by scene, but that's kind of what I'm doing right now.
Dave, you're doing a great job, so I'm going to kind of let you run through it quickly, because I know if I keep jumping in, it's going to take longer.
Well, you can jump in if you want to, but if we both start to ramble, I'll just cut it off.
Sounds legit.
So this leads to Noelle eventually going to Jake's house and meeting his son, and Noelle and Jake's son hit it off, and they sort of click, and they're bonding with each other. And Jake is surprised by this because he doesn't think his son really tends to connect with anyone. And so anyways, it becomes this story of not only Jake trying to help Noelle find her brother, but at the same time trying to get Jake and his son to connect, because they don't really connect with each other. Like, Jake's son is into cooking, and Jake has no idea about it, but, his son tells Noelle at the breakfast table about it when Jake's not around. So it ends up being that Noelle and Jake are both trying to help each other out for different reasons. Anyways, back at the North Pole, Gabe is taken over, and everyone is concerned that it's getting closer to Christmas, and they don't know how they're going to deliver the presents because, of course, Noelle took the sleigh and the reindeer, so there's no way for Gabe to fly around the world. And Gabe's like, well, this is the perfect time to get with the future, get with the now. And he's going to like outsource all of the deliveries to Amazon. And everyone's like, well, how can you do that? There's so many children around the world. Like, you can't just give it to Amazon. They're not going to be able to handle that much presents. And Gabe's like, well, actually, there's really not that many good children around the world. There's only, and then he spouts a number, it's like 2,357 or something like that. So he's like, there's only 2,357 good children around the world. All the other children have their flaws, and the children that have flaws are going to get an email or a text that tells them that if they change their ways, they will be in consideration to get back onto the nice list next year. And of course, this causes an uproar because, Christmas is about giving children presents, giving them some leeway. Nick and Noelle's mom even makes a point of saying that, like, they're children, like, they're not going to be perfect. You have to give them some leeway. But Gabe isn't going to budge on this. Anyways, Jake finally tracks Nick down at a yoga studio. he is now a yoga instructor in Phoenix. So Noelle goes there and, they reconnect. And Noelle's trying to get Nick to go back to the North Pole with her. And he's like, I don't want to go back. I love it here. I enjoy this. So they get into a big fight, which leads Noelle to walk out. So Noelle walks out of the yoga studio and blows out the candles in anger, which apparently is a big no-no. You're not supposed to blow out the candles in the yoga center.
Yeah, when she does that, as they're arguing, she looks at the candle. He's like, "Don't you do it? Don't do it!" And she blows it out. And he's like, "Wow, that's a big deal here."
Bill Hader is absolutely great. Bill Hader is great.
Bill Hader's yeah, exactly. I was gonna say Bill Hader is great in almost everything he does. You know? That guy's so funny.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He did a great job in this movie as well. And so Anna Kendrick leaves, and this is where where I lose my memory for the movie. But I think she goes back to Polly and tells her that she hasn't been able to convince Nick to go back to the North Pole. And at the same time, she's still spending time with Jake and his son. And she's telling Jake that, that his son's biggest wish is for Jake to spend Christmas with his ex, Jake's son's mother, and her new boyfriend. And Jake is very reluctant to do it. He thinks that they're both going to hate him. And this, of course, is making Jake's son mad. And let me just find Jake's son's name, because I don't want to just keep calling him Jake's son.
Oh, I have it. Give me 2 seconds.
Alex.
Fine.
Oh, and just something that I'll mention right now, because it's going to be key a little later on. While they were originally searching for Nick, Noelle and Jake went to local homeless shelters, and Noelle connected with this one little girl who was deaf and could only use sign language. And Noelle started communicating with her with sign language, and Noelle had no idea that she was able to use sign language. She didn't know how she did it, but somehow she was able to use sign language and communicate with this little girl. So, anyways, back to the story. Things are getting worse and worse at the North Pole, as Gabe is insisting that there's only 2,000 some odd children that are nice. And of course, Nick and Noelle's mom is still trying to convince him that there's more nice children than that. And Nick ends up going on a yoga retreat, and Noelle has to find him to try to bring him home. What ends up happening is her own personal reindeer, Snow Cone, ends up flying on his own from the North Pole to Phoenix, because Noelle left him behind when she originally flew to Phoenix. So Snow Cone helps Noelle find Nick at this yoga retreat that he's on. And again, just like back at the yoga studio, Noelle is trying to convince Nick to come back to the North Pole. And Nick is just steadfast against it. And she's like, okay, just come to the mall, make an appearance as Santa Claus, get into the role. And I know once you get into the role, you'll like it. And so because Noelle is basically ruining the peace and quiet of the retreat, Nick agrees to go to the mall with her. So the next day they're at the mall, and Nick, dressed up in his Santa outfit and everything, sits on the Santa chair that the mall has set up, and starts to talk to the kids about what they want for Christmas. And again, he's just not getting into it. He doesn't feel comfortable with it. And all of a sudden, one kid comes up to him and he's like, "You told me I'm not going to get any presents this year," and shows him the text from Gabe. And Nick's like, "Yeah, I didn't write that." And the kid's like, "But it says from Santa." And then all of a sudden, everyone else's phones go off with the text messages and email alerts. And then in the midst of that, the person that the mall had hired to play Santa Claus shows up and starts a fight with Nick, because he's like, "Hey, this is my gig. You're not supposed to be here." And so Nick and him start arguing, and then Noelle physically like assaults the mall Santa, and she gets arrested for that. And they end up sending her to sort of like a mental ward for a mental assessment, because not only did she beat up the mall Santa, but we find out later when Nick goes to the police station to try to get Noelle out, she also fought a police officer.
Didn't they show her fighting the police officer? I
don't believe they did. I think they only showed her fighting the mall Santa. I could be wrong on that. I should know this because I've watched this movie more than I care to admit. I've only watched it once, but I'm pretty sure when she was fighting the mall Santa, the cop tried to pull her off, and then she started fighting him, and that's why she got arrested, right? Because she's attacking a police officer, right? So yeah. And then because of that, they put her in a ward for a mental assessment. And so Nick, Polly, and Jake hatch up a plan to try to get her out. And so Jake goes in. So before Jake comes in to talk to her to try to help her break free, Noelle is talking to the mental health worker there. And the mental health worker is telling her about all the other Christmas people that are in that ward. Like, there's a man that thinks he's a tooth fairy. There's Mother Nature. And there's Frosty the Snowman. Now, it didn't dawn on me when I first watched this movie, but when I looked on IMDb in the trivia section, apparently this mental hospital scene was like a rejected plot line or an unused plot line from the unused script for the Santa Claus 4, because apparently there was going to be a Santa Claus 4 and it never got produced. And this scene was basically supposed to be in the Santa Claus 4 script.
Really?
And then when I think back on it, the mental health physician says that it's a man that thinks he's Tooth Fairy. And that calls back to the Santa Claus series where the Tooth Fairy is a man named Roy the Tooth Fairy. And Mother Nature, played by Aisha Taylor. So it didn't click when I first watched the movie, but when I read that piece of trivia on IMDb, I'm like, holy shit, that's awesome. And I'm assuming Frosty the Snowman got changed, but I'm assuming Frosty the Snowman was probably originally in the Santa Claus 4 script supposed to be Jack Frost, because obviously he was like a crazy motherfucker in the Santa Claus 3, but we won't get into that.
Yeah, so, what was funny about that was when, as the healthcare worker is naming off these people, and she gets to Frosty, and that's when Kendrick is just like, wait, Frosty's here? And then she's like, no, that's not possible. We're in Phoenix. He would melt.
Yeah. Like, she didn't believe the other two, but she was so excited with Frosty. She thought Frosty was there for a second. But so Jake steps in and he's like, I just got to talk to her for a couple minutes. Can you give us a few minutes alone? And the mental health worker's like, yeah, okay. And so Jake's like, so Noelle says to Jake, you finally believe me? And he's like, no, but I believe that you believe that you're from the North Pole. So he's talking to her, and all of a sudden, as he's talking to her, Polly and Nick fly by the window on the sleigh. So Noelle climbs out the window into the sleigh, and as Noelle gets into the sleigh, the mental health worker comes back into the room, and she sees the sleigh, and she has a hard time believing it, so she just faints and passes out.
Yeah, she passes out. Even Jake is kind of like, what the fuck, you know?
Yeah. So anyways, Nick, Noelle, and Polly fly back to the North Pole, and obviously things are in chaos because of Gabe, and they have another elder council meeting with all the North Pole townfolk, and Nick steps up and says, he isn't ready to be Santa, but his sister Noelle is. And that's when the elders are like, yeah, there's nothing in our decrees and our laws that say Santa Claus can't be a woman. So they finally decide that Noelle should be Santa Claus. And Noelle's taken aback at first because she's like, no, I'm not supposed to be Santa Claus. But she becomes Santa Claus. She puts on the Santa Claus suit, which is obviously way too big for her. And she's delivering around the world. And it's brought up in the narration that she forgets a couple of countries along the way. And she's struggling. She's having a hard time being Santa and delivering the presents. And then she gets to the homeless shelter where she visited with Jake, with the deaf girl. And of course, at this point, she's still struggling to be Santa Claus. And she trips over like a toy guitar, which goes off and wakes up everybody in the homeless shelter. And then obviously the little deaf girl wakes up and she starts communicating with with Noelle. And she eventually says, she calls Noelle Santa. And Noelle sounds back, Santa? And the deaf girl's like, yeah. So the little deaf girl believed in Noelle's ability to be Santa, and that's why I wanted to make sure I got back to that scene earlier and didn't just pass over it. And that little girl in that little moment really helped Kendrick, or help Noelle, thank you, get the confidence to become Santa. And as she's walking out of the homeless shelter, the suit shrinks and becomes more of like a Santa dress than a Santa suit, and it now fits her because she's accepted her role as Santa Claus. And she's calmed herself and she finishes making the proper deliveries. And then she picks up Jake and takes Jake to his ex-wife's house with her new boyfriend and delivers him there for Christmas morning so he can have breakfast with Alex and his mom and and her new boyfriend. Because it's always been a tradition with Alex, Jake, and Jake's ex that they would have Christmas breakfast together. And this was going to be the first year that wasn't going to happen. But Noelle made sure it did happen. And then at the end, she gets back to the North Pole. She's accepted that she's Santa Claus. Everyone else has accepted that she's Santa Claus. And it shows the changes she's made. She puts Polly on the Elder Elves Commission thing, which she says she kind of regrets doing that because Polly just like bullies everybody. Yep. She helped her brother Nick open up a yoga studio in the North Pole. And she worked more closely with Gabe in the IT department to try to combine, old-fashioned North Pole Christmas traditions with new age technology for the changing world. So, it shows her implementing all these changes. And,
one of the things she implemented before, right when she was taken off to do the deliveries, was that she made her reindeer Snow Cone the lead reindeer as well. Right?
Yes, yeah, tiny little Snow Cone, barely more than like 2 feet tall.
Yeah, it was. I loved that. Anything with her and Snow Cone, like even the beginning of the movie. I don't think we talked about this. Was when she starts singing for him and like nothing.
Yeah, he doesn't like, come.
Yo, Snow Cone, and he just shows up. Fantastic. Anna Kendrick is just. Oh, I'm not gonna lie. Okay, it is well known and well documented on this podcast that I do not like Christmas. Okay, I was okay with watching this because of Anna Kendrick, and I'm not gonna lie, Dave, I actually liked it because of Anna Kendrick.
Okay, so I mean that is gonna bring us to ratings, because that did pretty much wrap up the movie with her finally accepting that she's Santa Claus and making those changes at the North Pole. So Josh, you enjoyed this more than you expected.
I think I enjoyed it more than you thought I would expect it to, right?
What is your rating gonna be?
You know what? I'm gonna give it a solid 7 there, Dave. A solid 7.
Ooh.
That's not bad, right?
That's not bad. That is not bad at all. So you seem to be on the same page as Denver Juggler. You both enjoyed this movie. I want it to like this movie so bad. It's It's Anna Kendrick. It's Bill Hader. It's a Christmas movie. 3 things I absolutely love. And, like, still, I hope there's people, obviously there's people out there that are going to enjoy this movie more than me, because you're proving it. And
surprisingly, right?
This is just, I want to like this movie more than I do, but for me, this is just such kind of a forgettable movie. Like, I honestly, like I said, I can't even remember how many times I've watched this movie to try to, like, take notes or to just try to memorize it and refresh my memory so we could record this podcast. I've watched this movie at least 5 times, maybe 6 or 7, and I was still stumbling to try and remember things that happened in this movie. There are small moments that are really, really fantastic. The moments Noelle has with the little deaf girl, that shit touched my heart and fucking brought me to tears. Especially the moment at the end when it's the little girl that gives Noelle the confidence to be Santa. Like, that shit touched me and I absolutely loved it. But there's just so many other things that I mean, it's a good fun family Christmas movie. It wasn't one that I particularly liked. I'm very hard. You talk about things being well documented. It is well documented how hard I am on Halloween Town for their goddamn special effects in that movie. And I'm going to be just as hard on Noelle for a movie that was made last year in 2019, probably shot and all put together over the course of 2017, 2018, and then released last year. Man, the CGI graphics, especially on Snow Cone, holy shit, were god awful. At least in my opinion. They're all right, they're passable, but for a movie made in the 2010s, the late 2010s, going into the 2020s, with the budget that Disney now has because of how big of a conglomerate and how big of a giant that they've become, there was no excuse for some of that CGI shit to be as bad as it was. The fact that it's barely passable in some instances is not good in my opinion. I know other people are going to see it and just be like, hey, it's a fun little Christmas movie, and that's fine for them. But for me, there's just a lot of things with this movie that brought the rating down for me. I think I'm going to give it, I'm going to go with a 4.5.
Okay. 4.5. That's much lower than I thought you were going to go with that, Dave.
And it pains me because I absolutely love Anna Kendrick. I love Christmas. I love Bill Hader. But yeah, no, this one was a 4.5 for me.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't know. I loved the Snow Cone. I loved Snow Cone. I thought everything that they did with Snow Cone was great. And Anna Kendrick is just fantastic, right?
I love the idea of Snow Cone. I just thought that the CGI on Snow Cone could have been and should have been better for the age of technology that we are currently in.
I mean, okay, I guess. But, like, for me, I'm taking out the whole, like, it's a Christmas movie, but, like, Anna Kendrick was funny in this movie. I was trying to take it as a comedy more of a Christmas movie, I guess, in some points, but I don't know. I liked it, surprisingly. Pretty much the only reason I watched it or agreed to watch it was because it was Anna Kendrick. I don't know. I liked it, surprisingly.
Yeah, I'm shocked that you have a higher rating than I do on this.
Yeah, it's funny because, like, when I started watching it, I messaged one of my friends and I was like, I'm watching a Christmas movie, kill me now. And then that was like 10 minutes into it, and then I got into it literally just because of Anna Kendrick. No, but I didn't mind it, Dave. I liked it. I did like it, surprisingly.
Well, that's good, and I'm sure there are a lot of other people out there that are gonna like it too. It's like I said, it's a fun movie for families. It's a good little movie for families during Christmas time. Just wasn't for me. Just didn't enjoy it as much as I was expecting to. So yeah, 4.5 from me, 7 from Josh. and Denver Juggler also gave it his approval. So I'm outvoted on this one, but yeah, we're at 45 minutes, so we're going to start wrapping things up. But man, before we go, like I said at the very beginning, this is the last episode of the podcast for 2020. And man, I can't thank you guys enough for listening to this. This is done way better than I was expecting it to when I text Josh back in April asking him if he wanted to do a Disney podcast because there was no wrestling going on and we couldn't do our wrestling podcast.
Yeah, no, I remember when you sent that message, I was just like, hell yeah, like, of course, Disney. Again, it's well documented how much I love Disney and how much I go to Disney World every year, right?
Yep.
Like, this year has been killing me not being able to go. I mean, I did make it there once. Normally I go 3 or 4 times, so once is better than nothing. But like, it killed me. And thank you guys for listening and liking this show, and especially those Descendants episodes. We might have to go back to that, right, Dave?
Well, the new year, we're going to start off with the first episode of the new year is basically just going to be our thoughts and memories of our first year of doing this podcast,
Review.
which is why I'm not going to go too much into it here. But I do just want to say thank you, everybody who has listened. We greatly appreciate you listening. Again, you can follow us on the social medias. Twitter at Ocho Ortiz Disney, Facebook.com/Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod, Instagram at Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod, TikTok, look for Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod. You can help us by getting some merch, teespring.com/stores/Ocho-and-Ortiz. We have merch from both this podcast and our wrestling podcast on there. And if you buy anything before December 20th, use promo code BIRTHDAY at checkout to save 20% off of your purchase. You can also go to shop.spreadshirt.com/Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod. And if you'd like, you can become our patron on Patreon, patreon.com/Ocho and Ortiz Disney Pod. Once again, thank you to the executive producer of this episode, William L. And of course, the best way you can support us for free is just continuing to do what you guys are doing, which is just listening to the show. And we would greatly appreciate it if you guys engaged with us more. Leave us some comments, leave us some feedback, give us some ratings, follow us, share us, let your friends know about us. That's the best way you can help us for free and to help us grow for free. So with that being said, Josh, do you have any final words before we go?
No, I just want to say thanks again for listening, guys. We'll be back in the new year. Stay safe with everything, and we'll see you then.
Yep. And once again, thank you for a great first year, which just blew us away with how much we've come to this point, or how far we've come to this point. We hope you guys all have a good Christmas, good holiday season, whatever you're celebrating. Have yourself a safe and happy new year. Hopefully 2021 goes better for everyone than what 2020 did. But we will see you in 2021 with a not 1 year, but just sort of our first year review episode. And as always, guys, whether you're listening to this in the morning, the afternoon, the evening, whatever time of day it is, where you are, when you're listening, we appreciate you listening. We thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Adios. Can you hear Sirius?
I can.
Fucking asshole.